G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it. Welcome, everyone. Today I'm interviewing Damian Andrews from Damian Andrews and SHAIR.care. He's based in Melbourne, Australia. Thanks for your time today, Damian.
Pleasure to be here, Troy. Thanks for having me on your show.
Let's start with how we know each other. We both use the Matchmaker platform online. It's not for dating, just for the audience clarification.
It's kind of we're dating in a way.
Podcast dating.
Podcast dating, yeah. Let's see how we go.
Yeah, we've both got the same haircut, so
exactly. Too many U-turns under the sheets. That's what it is.
Tell our audience a bit about your business, what it does, and how it makes money.
Yeah, one of my primary business that I have, a business and a foundation. Primary business is consulting largely into big corporates and improving efficiencies, have programs to do with continuous improvement, how to implement and change very quickly and rapidly, how to increase revenue and profit, because they go together. There's no point increasing revenue without considering the profit. So we really focus on those simple elements that a lot of people miss. They overlook, they overcomplicate it. So our focus is really to bring it back to what are the core things that you can do, not more, but what can you do differently? And that's part of changing the habits, because a lot of it, as we know, we're linked by habits in what we do. And it's if you can tap into that changing of habits, you can get a really harmonious change, resulting in significant increases in revenue and profit, and also employee satisfaction, which we know employee turnover is a massive cost. How to get it so employees feel appreciated and they want to come to work and do a good job. Yeah,
totally. And I'm a big efficiency geek. I love making things teams work faster, more productively. Sorry, not enough coffee today. But with that, implementing greater efficiency and productivity in teams and workplaces, obviously there's a lot of change management that you have to be very, very good at to be able to steer everyone through that, because it's habits that need to be built. That takes over 2 months to build a new habit, and just humans don't like change. So that must be a big part of what you and your team bring into a business.
Exactly. And part of that is inspiring people to want to change, to take ownership of that. And we have a program, part of what I call Exceptional Effort. It's a program that we run. One module of that is the continuous improvement module. There's a time management module, which is a misnomer. Time's a constant. It's about effort management. But the continuous improvement module, we implemented in a way where it's a mandatory, very short get together, starts on time, must start on time, must finish on time. So we get that because you know what it's like with most meetings. You turn up, you're sitting there waiting, it's gone past the start date, not start time, and then they drag on, and so we implement that. It starts exactly on the second of when it started, no more than half an hour, and we have a process where everyone, we go through different tasks that people have to do. Everyone gets a task at the end of the meeting, and one of the things they implement is what's called a no excuse policy, and so everyone, when they say they get a task, they actually set their own tasks, what they've got to have done by the next meeting. And then what happens is at the next meeting, if you don't get it done, it's not about shame or anything like that. There's no guilt there. But the person reporting in on what they've done can't give an excuse if they haven't done it. Doesn't matter if something come out of left field or whatever, you can't give an excuse. And it's amazing the accountability that brings, because they set the task. And then they come in, they can't say, oh, it didn't happen because of this. All they can say is, I didn't do it.
Yep.
And then we move on to the next person. And it's really interesting, the accountability that's created, and the change happens really, really quickly because of that. The other element that came as a surprise through the process that we've got there is that, and it was a surprise to me, was complaints within the organizations stopped almost immediately because of the way we structure this. People feel heard. They feel that even though they know, that their problems might not can be dealt with straight away, we've heard their problem and it is there to be dealt with, and they understand the logic as to why it's not being dealt with straight away. So that was a surprise. I wasn't expecting, it wasn't planned for that, but it's amazing what that does to an organization's culture. If people aren't complaining, they're going, okay, I understand, and they're moving forward. It's really a dramatic impact.
And on that accountability piece, there's a big part of that is the peer accountability, turning up to a meeting and you've got to have done your homework. Otherwise, you've got to look your other teammates in the eyes and say, not done.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where it's really ironic. Every company that I've implemented in, there's the one, because they say it's a mandatory meeting, but a lot of times the first ones, a lot of people don't turn up. They've got something on, and it's no, again, not, oh, you must turn up. It's just we run it. And then through that, people get something out of it and it filters through. And it's the same, it's metrosexual guy. I swear it's the same guy in every company. He's wearing the tight shirt, goes to the gym a lot. He eventually turns up, sits at the back of the room with his arms crossed. And then progressively, as time goes on, it's usually about a 6-week process. He's sitting in the middle of the room. Yeah, and then he's one of the biggest contributors. It's ironic how that works, but it's that process of leading people well, and it works.
Do you want to talk a little bit about SHAIR.care before we move on?
Yeah, SHAIR.care was a foundation that was born out of, I was actually the CEO of the Family Peace Foundation, which was set up by Frank and Rhonda Walker of National Tiles. I don't know if you have them in Tasmania, but
I hear his ads every day. I'm in the car. He's got a unique voice. Put it that
well,
way.
to be fair, it's not Frank anymore. It's there's a voice. Well, there was a voice actor. I think they've actually got an AI doing it now. But he's retired out of the business, and that's why he set up the foundation. And through that, we realized when I was setting up that organization, which was to help prevent family violence, is that if you had a family problem, well, let's say you want to learn to speak well. Where do you go? You go to Toastmasters. If you've got an alcohol problem, you go to Alcoholics Anonymous. There's all these organizations dealing with specific problems. What we looked at and what I noticed in doing this research, if you have a family problem, if you have a problem dealing with your children or relationship with your wife or husband, or if you have an issue with your brother or sister, for example, you can go and get counselling, which costs a lot of money. There is Relationships Australia, but that's really for the court, for people to go through the process before they go to court. But you can go there, but it's a 2 to 3 month waiting list. And so we looked at it and went, well, actually, there are some key principles that if you apply these, you actually build a strong, healthy, and inspiring relationship, which is what the acronym SHAIR stands for. And the website, SHAIR.care, ironically, that was available. And it turns out, and I chose SHAIR because I looked it up in the dictionary from a marketing perspective. It wasn't a word, like Uber's not a word. I thought this is great marketing. It turns out that it is a word. It's actually an Islamic word that means fountain of wisdom, ironically. That was really cool. So what we did was we created a set of principles. From the research, these are the key principles that create a strong, healthy, and inspiring relationship. But then we wanted to take it further. I'm like, well, what if we had these guiding principles as to how to behave? And so what we were looking at was how do we do this? What is that? And we actually drew inspiration from the Knights Shivratic Code. And we looked at that. And so we actually rewrote the Knights Code for a modern era, made it gender neutral, and added a few different things in. Like the Knights Code had, we're not going to take offense at the opinions of others. That was in there. But we added, we're going to laugh at ourselves and not take offense at the opinion of others. So a bit of self-deprecation in there. And so we actually created the code, which becomes this really wonderful guiding principle to use your strength to help others. In today's world, we're not in a zero-sum game anymore. Innovation has made the world a positive-sum game. By helping others, you're making a bigger pie. You might help someone get an education, they become a doctor, they they cure cancer, and that helps save your child who gets cancer. So innovation, the incentive to help others is strongly there, and that's what we wanted to create with the code is that encouragement to remind people, if we look after others, we're going to be better off as a whole.
Right. And so how long ago did you start the foundation?
That was originally, the idea started in about 2016, and it's progressively growing. And now we've got a network of people around the world who are connecting. There's the SHAIR.care podcast. We've got a couple of other innovations and things coming up where we're actually connecting with different groups. And there's other mediums that we're going to be sharing information on coming out soon. I can't announce that yet, but they're coming out, and there'll be an announcement in, I think, probably late June, early July, as to another major change in how we're sharing information.
Yeah, great. All right. How did you start out?
Yeah. I was, going back in the Wayback Machine, the Doc Brown DeLorean. Let's hit 88 miles an hour. Is that what you? We can go back. We go right back. When I was in school, I didn't. I mean, I loved to learn, but I didn't like the structure of school, so I didn't want to be there. And my dad said I wasn't allowed to leave school unless I had a job. And about 2 weeks later, the army recruitment people came around, and so I signed up. And I get to boot camp and I realize running around the bush is not that much fun. Australia, we only have one bush,
Yeah,
so,
all of Australia.
exactly. And but I was mature enough to recognize that I wasn't going to get one of the good jobs. The signals and the host hike, there's only a few of those available once you finish boot camp. And people that didn't get one of those went to infantry, and I didn't want to do that. And I'm 18 years old. And then there was one position that no one was applying for. And that was a chef's position. So my first thought, 18 years old, girls like guys that can cook. That was my first motivation.
Right.
My second motivation was it'll get me out of going to the infantry. And the third one's, well, maybe I can use this as a career if I leave the army. So that was my priority list back then. Anyway, so I went there and I went to the School of Cooks, where you learn chefing and high quality cooking, because you've got to cook for officers and they need all that high quality stuff. So you learn actually fairly detailed a la carte cooking. While I was there, they asked one of the guys on my course, did he want to go to Perth? And he said no. And I thought, I wanted to get out and get around. And I said, well, I'll go to Perth. And they said, oh, if you can pass the psych test, you can go. I'm like, yeah, whatever. I didn't think about where it was or what I was doing or where I was going. So I've done the psych test. I jumped in my car, drove across the Nullarbor from Melbourne, it was Puckapunyal to Melbourne. And it turns out I'm posted to the SAS. So I went to the SAS and did all, jumping out of airplanes, diving from submarines, rock climbing into caves, all that kind of stuff, and learned to cook. I don't have the same hair as Steven Seagal, but maybe it was the kind of.
I was about to say that, yeah, because he was a SAS chef, wasn't he?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, so from there, but then I came back to Melbourne after I did my time. I worked in the mine sites after I got out of the army for a bit, and then came back to Melbourne, studied commerce and accounting and law, and I went to work in insolvency, so I got a lot of experience going into companies, running them. Had to take over the company, and you see, I had to walk into a company that they say to the director, "You're not in charge anymore. I am," or the administrator, whoever it is, but I'm the representative of the administrator. I have to create rapport with the employee straight away, get them to continue on, because the most value in the company is if it's sold as a going concern. So you want to create that. So very quickly, I learned all these different skills of creating rapport, implementing change, because there's things that needed to change, and doing that in a harmonious way. So there was a lot of on the ground learning from that perspective. Plus, there was a lot of law and accounting in there as well. And then, I moved out from there. I had the opportunity to do some insolvency or corporate recovery type work as a consultant. I started doing that, which then led to doing other work, a lot of work in construction, but with other companies. I worked in retail as well with a number of different businesses, and helping improve them, being able to implement that change. And that's kind of the journey where I got from there, and then progressively moved forward to adding different areas of that with different trainings, with direct consulting, and as we mentioned in the pre-show, a couple of little startups, but they haven't got up and running yet. But having some great results with the clients that I worked with. We mentioned the pre-show, one of a small little engineering company that was a second generation company, turning over 8 million just before COVID started. And with a couple of changes, they didn't have to work any harder. They didn't do any extra effort. They just did things slightly differently. They went from 8 million to 25 million turnover, and still making wonderful profit.
Wow, that's great.
Mm.
And so what year did you start the business, and how old were you?
Oh, what am I? I'm 50 now. So that was probably when I went out by myself about 12 years ago, 12 or 15 years ago, I started to go, but it wasn't a conscious, it wasn't like I built a business plan and said, I'm going to do this. It was, I could do what I was doing and charge a lot more money than I could in as an employee. And so that was kind of the motivation to go out and do that. And it just sort of grew from there, and had, we were doing exceptionally well, but then there's some life changes in there. There was a family breakup, with my partner that I was with, which affected that. And I spent a lot of time focusing on my son and spending time with him. Made that my priority. I was still doing work, but not not as actively in the business. He was my priority. I wanted to make sure that was the case, but now he's a lot old. He's 14 now and quite set. So a couple of years ago, I made a conscious effort to start moving this forward again, and had some great leaps and bounds from there.
And what year, and you say it's 12 years journey so far, like how far in, or can you remember what year you started piling on team members?
Oh, it's been yeah. So there was a team, probably, if we go back, so initially there was a big team going back probably about 9 years ago-ish. It was very early on. It grew fairly quickly. There was a whole bunch of it, and there was a number of different areas and a lot of different webs that we're in, and a lot of consult. And then, but I said, then through a relationship problem, we pulled back, and now we've gone back, and over the past few years, got up to roughly 12 people that come and help out and do various different things.
Great. That's awesome growth. Do you have any key numbers you can share to illustrate the growth of the business? We've just talked about number of full-time equivalents. You started on your own. You got up to 12 now. You're a bit higher than that 10 years or so ago. Any other key numbers you can share to illustrate the growth?
I'm just trying to think, because you did put that in the notes, and from my own personal perspective, I didn't. I can't remember we were turning over quite a bit. I'm just trying to think of the actual numbers, and because there were different divisions as to where that was. There was the training component, there was consulting. So there's a number of different areas there. I know mentioned one of my clients where we went from 8 million to 25 million, helped the company go to 1 billion to turnover in a short period of time. Unfortunately, they didn't focus on the profit side of things as much as I tried to reiterate it. It's amazing how, and this is where, from my perspective, and it's the filters that we have. I had a client recently, it's still a client, and this was about 2 years ago. They had a dispute. It's a $25 million dispute with a subcontractor. And the contract very clearly said, if it doesn't, the mediation failed, the next step is to court. And I'm highlighting that. So I put in place a structure where we controlled the mediation. We said, this is how we're going to do that. It's a detailed, there was 2,200 different line items within that $25 million to work through. So this is going to take a while to work through. We're not going to do this quickly. Let's put in place a procedure where we set up a mediation to go through that. It's not going to be a full mediation. The mediator is going to see there's a problem, that we need to resolve this, but at least we haven't ended it, because then you can't go to court. And then some more senior people came in from the organization. They brought a couple of lawyers with them from a big law firm, and big law firm said, no, we need to do a one-day mediation. And I said, do you see that there? It says end mediation, next step is court. And they go, yeah, we see that. But they followed big law firm, and they had their one-day mediation. It failed. This was a little bit over 2 years ago. They're still in court. They spent $14 million in legal fees alone, and 14, they're going to have 14 million.
Jeez, whoa, holy shit! Yeah,
and it's a very, very, very complex claim. And this is where we're talking about from. Do people? It's not that there's issues there. It's about getting people to let go of that ego and actually listen. And sometimes they don't. You know what it's like. You can lead a horse to water, and you can't make a drink. And I have that at the very beginning of a lot of things I do with organizations, is say there's a difference between teaching and learning. I can't teach you. I cannot teach you. You can learn if you want to listen, but I can't teach you. And so they're still in court. And they're going to have to pay. At the end of the day, there was a claim there, and I estimated to be they're going to have to pay about $8 million. That was my estimate. Maximum maybe 12, but I would have said roughly you could have settled this for 8 if we had to work through all the detail. I said now they've paid 14 in legal fees alone, and they're still going to have to pay.
Wow. Phenomenal. When was the moment you felt like you had succeeded?
That's going to come back to my son, as much as I like to focus on business. When my son, and this is again a change management thing for my son, I'm teaching him to be, there's a couple of moments, and we were watching the Aladdin movie, and my son turns to me, I'm a contracts person, and he turned to me and he said, Dad, you know what? The genie said you can't wish for more wishes, but the genie didn't say you can't wish for more lamps. So I'm going to wish for 10 lamps and get 30 wishes. And I just went chip off the old block. That's finding the fine print in there.
Yeah, I find the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. With my daughter, she picks up a bit of the lingo with my work and
Yeah.
what I do. And sometimes, after a long day or a long week, my guard's down, or I drop all my work stuff and all my training, let's call it. And 2 minutes into a conversation, I'm turning. I realize, holy fuck, she's negotiating with me. So I've got to put my work armor back on and go, no, this is not happening. Or subtly influence her, do the Jedi mind trick on her to get her past whatever she's fixated on. To No, we're not talking about this. I'm the adult in the conversation here.
Yeah, exactly. And it was the same sort of thing with his school. I said to him, I said, hey, if you take, whatever you do in school, if you come home, just read through it. Just go through it. It'll take you, what, 15, 20 minutes, do you think? And he goes, yeah, that's about right. And I said, if you do that, your exam study is going to be much easier. That's how your brain works. If you reinforce it early, it's going to stick in there more. So I noticed him doing that. And I was like, okay, this is cool. He's doing it. And then he stopped. I'm like, okay, what's going on here? And I said, how's the study going? You still, do you still remember that conversation we had about, learning, revising after school? And he goes, yeah, yeah. And I said, are you still doing that? And he goes, yeah, Dad, I worked out if I do it during my free time at school, I don't have to do it when I get home.
Oh,
And I can,
right.
and I went, so that when feeling like a success, I mean, my goal is to implement change within organizations. That's one of the things I do, and I think I do very well. But the fact that to have that impact with my son kind of shows that that's probably how I operate, because I haven't really taken it as a thing to teach him that. He's just followed that lead,
Yeah,
so that's part of how I feel like a success.
that's great. And what does success look like to you?
For me, I mean, success is being clear about what I want. I know this is probably cliche, but every day I actually feel really good. I understand how, and this is part of what we implement with organizations, with creating a culture. There's three areas where we focus on setting goals for an organization. One is, obviously profit and money, that kind of thing. The other area that we focus on is organizational. So how do things operate? How do we do things a little bit more efficiently? And the third is in culture. What is the culture you want to create? How do we want to create this environment? And that's part of, every day I feel great because I understand if I think a happy thought, my body immediately starts producing dopamine and serotonin. So it's implementing in place processes where you set it up, not only that you're in an environment where you feel like you're succeeding, you feel like you're being appreciated. And so for me, that's what success feels like, is feeling like, me being able to recognize that I create how I feel in the day, and then I can share that with other people as well to help create that for them so that they have great lives, and being able to manage their time, manage their effort so that they can use that fixed amount of time to get what they need to get done, so that then they can go and spend time doing other things that they like to do as well, get that life balance.
Number one thing you'd recommend to marketing a fast-growing business?
Understand the ratios. There's four areas that a business needs to action: sales, marketing, operations, and administration. And administration, 5 to 10% of your time. Operations, 20 to 30% of your time. Marketing and sales is the balance, should
Yeah.
be at least combined 60% time. And understand the difference between marketing and sales. Marketing is letting people know you're out there. Sales is being able to take those people and convince them that you can do what you can say you can do. That's what sales is someone's heard about you and you're saying, yeah, you can do all these great things, but what processes do you have in place to show them that, hey, I can do what I say I can do? Because that's what sales is. If they trust that you can do what you can do, and you can add value to what their business, you don't have to sell anything. That people go, yeah, that's a given. I'll do that.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite Peter Drucker quotes. There are only two functions in a business that create value: marketing and innovation. Everything else is
Yeah.
a cost.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
100%. And we need to understand that and make that balance. So, and a lot of times people are doing the administration, they'll start their day and go through their emails. That's an administration task.
Yeah.
Do that later.
Hmm.
Get on the phone and call somebody up. That's one of the with a client, we had that. We went in and they were like, how do we increase revenue? I said, where's your client list? And they go, here. I said, how many of those clients have you contacted recently? And they went, and I said, okay, get on the phone now. And they called, and the first person they go, actually, we've got something for you. That was the response.
Yeah.
And I do that, and you can do that in a number of ways as well. I've done that where I've called not so much for a sales call delivery, and it was an honest, a genuine. I mean, it was a sales, it was a marketing call, but I was calling up to, and I knew the person, and I called up after New Year and just someone to say, "How was the New Year?" And I deliberately said, "I'm not going to ask them for anything. I'm just going to call to touch base and inquire how they are because I care about them." So I had that conversation. How are you? How are the kids? Blah, blah, blah. And we had that conversation. And they've said to me, "Oh, yeah, we've actually got this work." So sales and marketing, that it falls into those categories. But you do it in a way that shows you care. You don't have to be calling up and doing the hard sell. Show that you care and show that you can add value. And from that, you become much, much more efficient. And because people want that. They know, they're so used to people asking and, selling them. Show that you care in your sales and be more successful.
And how did you fund the business?
Just out of its natural growth.
Yep.
So initially, it as a consulting, it started originally as a consulting business. It had little overheads to pay for, so it grew out of that. There's some software development that we're working on in one of the organizations. I mentioned, so they've got some startups there, which is in the programming area for construction, mostly construction, but there's some software we're developing which is now coming out of the money. I took the philosophy out of Bill Gates. I don't know if you know that story. When he first started Microsoft, his concern was that if they went through a tough time, they wouldn't have the income to support wouldn't have the cash to support their employees. So he mandated that they save 1 year's worth of salary. They have that as cash in the bank consistently. And so can only imagine what that dollar figure was, because they never changed it when they were big. That's how much cash they had in the bank, and that's similar to what we did. It's the richest man in Babylon theory: save 10%. I think a business should do that as well. It just gives you security. There are going to be difficult times. Be careful in what you do and make sure you keep that security. So from that, we were able to keep. We had revenue there, but we made a goal to save. We had an objective we wanted to achieve, and we saved the money to do that for things where we needed to spend money on capital things.
I've just finished Jim Collins' book, Great by Choice. And it's one of the key messages in there is productive paranoia. And Microsoft's one of the companies in there that they study and show against their comparison company. But exactly that point, he was very big on having that 1 year cash balance to cover overheads. And he had a big argument with Steve Ballmer, because Ballmer did the numbers and said, we need to hire 17 people now. And Bill's going, no, we can't afford 17 people. So there was a thread or a theme across those companies that the study in this book was analysing companies that grew and stayed around through turbulent times, or either turbulent industries like the airlines or turbulent decades. And that was one of the key threads, was that productive paranoia, always worrying about what could go wrong. And obviously Bill Gates was very big on that.
Yeah, maybe that spawned out of my time working in corporate recovery, because there was so many good businesses that went under simply because they didn't have the capital to go through a hard time.
Yeah, they run out of cash. That's very common.
Yeah.
Can you outline the most stressful point in your small business growth journey so our audience can learn from it?
That would center around my own belief in myself. And I remember one of my mentors is a former managing director and chairman of BP. And I used to, we'd catch up infrequently, but every now and then I'd be messaging me as well, seeking some advice. And he deliberately, I think it was deliberate, that he would always respond 2 or 3 days later. And I think that was to make me think about it. And one day I had a meeting that was coming up, and I was really, really worried about it. And I messaged him and said, "This is an issue. I'm worried about this. Can you help me?" And ironically, not ironically, but just surprisingly, he responded straight away. And it was probably the most profound piece of advice I've ever received. And he said, "Damian, I think you should back yourself, that you'll make the right decision in the moment." And for me, that was that pivotal moment, going, just believe in myself. That's the transition that made. And from there was a lot of things before that where I was hesitant to do things. didn't, was, put things off. Should I do it? Is it going to work? Now it's just like, okay, this is the plan. We are doing this, and just boldly going forward, to quote Captain Kirk.
Boldly go where no man has before.
Exactly.
What have you enjoyed the least about managing fast growth?
Frustration in people not understanding how fast you can grow, and convincing people that you can't, that a whole adage of lead a horse to water and can't make a drink. There's a whole challenge in the challenge has been shifting people's beliefs that they can do it too, that you are capable of this. You can actually step out and make that transition as well. That's been for me back in the day, was very, very frustrating, because I'm like, we can do this. Let's go. And there's so much that was held back there. I mean, I've got much better at implementing that very quickly, but it's still a frustration getting people over their own beliefs. As I mentioned before with that court case, it's their own, what they see as your reticular activating system. We've all had that, where we're looking for something, we're looking ridiculous places like the fridge and under the sink and stuff like that, and then we find it sitting on the desk right there in front of us. It was always there, and it's just getting people to open those eyes up. That's the most frustrating thing for me.
If you were to start up today with plenty of funding, would you go into your industry?
With plenty of funding, yeah, definitely. I mean, I love the work that I do, and that's more what it's about, the change that we're implementing, and helping to see. So it's more about the people, and seeing people actually feel good about being at their work, enjoying being at work, wanting to be there, wanting to, to contribute. And that's part of what we linking. We have a program where we link values and understand what the organization's values is, and have a hiring process where you're hiring. I mean, obviously skills are important, but we're hiring more about character and values, and those character and specifically the values align with the company's values, because when they align, the people want to be there. So yeah, definitely from that perspective, because the work we're doing is transformational to people's lives. It's really, fundamental to see that, and to put that in context too, how we operate ourselves. I had an employee who's still with us, this employee, but was good, and then started to get not so good, and then started to get worse. And I'm thinking, what's going on here? And it got to the point where I'm thinking, I've got to fire this person. And I kept putting it off. And it was getting worse and worse and worse. And finally, I was just about to do it. And then it came up in a meeting. I was having a one-on-one meeting with this person, and it came up that they were feeling depressed. Actually, said they had depression. And so immediately I said, okay, this is your job description now. Part of, and it's not the only thing you're going to do, but it's the first thing you're going to do every day, is when you get up, you will write out 5 things you're grateful for. You'll do 10 box breaths, breathe in, hold, breathe out, hold. And you'll read 10 pages of an inspiring book. Don't care what it is, Think and Grow Rich, all those kind of things. Pick something, you'll read 10 pages of that. Changed 2 weeks, the person was completely different back, and not only different, but better than where they were good. And that's the kind of thing where we focus on. I forgot where I was going with that question, but it was implementing that, making that kind of change to people's lives. That's what makes it worthwhile.
What area in business do you feel you've had to work on the most to add the greatest value?
Not being an arrogant prick.
Yeah, I went through that transformation as well. Yeah.
Yeah. When I was younger, I used to think I knew everything and didn't listen. And that's been, I have a program called Negotiation Magic, which is very expensive. It's for high-end corporates, and negotiation program. And we have, a whole bunch of sources of power. There's 18 sources of power. There was 16. We discovered 2 more. And the key sources of power are listening and asking questions. They're 2 very, very, very powerful sources of power, because you're gathering information. But it's not just from a negotiation, a corporate environment. It works. I have that with my son. Listening to what he's got to say, and then asking him questions, guiding questions, but asking him questions. And he organizes his day fantastically now. And he doesn't sit on social media or anything like that. But also too of yourself, being able to do that of yourself, having that being able to be still and quiet. I do, for me, I've got a beach house down on Mornington Peninsula, and I got rid of the gardener, and I do what I call gumping now. I've got a large lawn. I got a self-propelled lawnmower, not one you sit on, but walk behind. And I'll go out there and I'll be Forrest Gump, going up and down, just alone, no headphones in, nothing like that, just alone, thinking about a problem or just having some quiet time. Sometimes the lawn doesn't need mowing, but I need my space, so I'll go out and I'll gump what I call. So
love it.
Yeah.
What do you love most about growing a small business?
I love the innovation. And especially, companies that make, and because with a small business, you can have that fast growth, but also you can implement that change as well. From an organization I worked with, one of my clients they had an old time card system where it was handwritten, these old guys, and they handwrote the time card out, and they wanted to go to obviously something more modern. It was time cards on their phone where they just entered that in. It was obviously a much more efficient system. And I implemented a change program with them where we sat down and being a bunch of old guys, I started with the statement, this might seem like scary, but don't worry about it. And I saw immediately about half of them sat up straight. I'm not going to be scared by this. So I had their attention.
Right.
And then from that, I had a few key things where I talked through about the process and gave them that ability to be listened to and said, look, we know this is not going to go smoothly. There's going to be problems. So I didn't tell them how wonderful it was all going to be. I laid it out. There's going to be some problems. But by the time I'd finished that 2-hour training, half of them had downloaded the app and logged in and created their own account. Within 2 weeks, I think it was pretty much implemented. But there were issues, but they came to us proactively and said, oh, this issue's come up. Here's a way, could we solve it this way? And they actually gave us suggestions. So they became very, very supportive. And all of a sudden, these 60-year-olds, 55 and 60-year-olds, are using technology and quite comfortable doing that. So that was, implementing those kind of things. That's really exciting part of small business.
What has been the biggest mindset shift for you in your small business growth journey?
Again, it come back to me that if there's a problem, it's me. And I have a friend of mine who's, he's got a very large business. This was a few years ago. It was an 80 million turnover business, but he was working flat out within the business, and he got very sick, and he actually couldn't go to work. Had to literally stay in bed. And it was about 8 months. And in that 8 months, the employees took the business, and he was still getting reports and things like that. So it wasn't like he wasn't able to be in the office. The business went from 80 million to 110 million turnover. While he wasn't there, and he realized what I need to do is get out of the way, set the direction and let people excel. And that's been the mind shift for me, because I'm quite talented. I believe I'm quite talented in a lot of areas. And too often I'd be trying to tell people this is how to do it, rather than ask them, hey, what's your input? When I made that shift, all of a sudden people were able to really flourish, and it was so surprising what they brought to the table and how it happened where in insolvency, where I would implement, if you've got a problem, come to me, with a couple of solutions. And all of a sudden I found people started to solve their own problems rather than bringing them to me.
The number one habit you think a small business owner needs to develop and maintain?
Good communication, good listening, and implement a habit of regular improvement. The whole thing of, and this happens with large corporates and deal with it all the time, there's two ways they implement change. They get some firm in that really knows nothing about the business. They spend a long time doing an interviews with all the different staff, and they come back and they give you a report probably 8 months later, and that report goes on the shelf, doesn't get used, collects dust. The other one is when they finish a project, they have a lessons learned. So they spend a day, half a day to a day doing a lessons learned. They have a big meeting, again, doesn't get implemented. Habit changes don't happen. Habits don't change from one. We know it takes, and this is obvious stuff. We know it takes roughly 28 times to change a habit. So as a small business, what you need to do is have a regular process where you get together minimum on a weekly basis, no more than half an hour, and pick something that you're going to fix. One thing, fix that, then move on to the next thing, fix that. What is the key priority? And if you implement that as a habit over 12 months, the transformation in the business will be profound. It's amazing.
Want to become the best manager you can be? Check out our Kick-Ass Manager course at growasmallbusiness.com. Do the course and add your fellow managers for no extra cost. Join the 30%. 70% of people quit their job because of their manager.
Can you talk to how you've added people to the team, some wins, mistakes, and advice for those listening?
Yeah, adding people to the team is really, again, from the very beginning. It's, for me, it's always been about character. I'm not sure why I did that, but hiring people based on character. I remember one guy I hired. He was from an African country. I can't remember where it was from. They invaded, the hostiles, whoever they were, the separatists, whatever you want to call them, militants come through, slaughtering people. So he fled. Walked his way to China. So wherever it was near China. So he's walked to China, somehow got involved in China, did some work there, come down to Hong Kong where he's met his wife. And then, he married her, came to Australia, and then built up, his work ethic there. And that was from that I was talking about. So you're really committed to working through the struggles and getting there. And he was an amazing performer. He could, just because he had that right character. So from me, employing people that have a good character, my focus is always finding out about the character of the person, not so much the technical skill. You can teach technical skills, hard to teach character.
Yep, totally agree. What are some of the things you recommend to building a sustainable and kick-ass culture to help with the growth?
Listening, having that, having the ability to allow people to feel appreciated. And part of that is listening and bringing people in and listening to their opinion. It doesn't mean that you follow their opinion, doesn't mean you agree with it, but you can listen to someone without agreeing it. But the fact that you've listened, and a lot of times, and we do this all the time, how many times have we been in, and I used to do a lot of time, you'd be listening to someone and you're immediately thinking about what you're going to say next. You're not really paying attention. And I know it's cliche. We've heard it over and over again, but the reason it's cliche because it actually works. If you can actually stop as the owner of a business or as a leader within the business, if you can stop and just make that little bit of time, it seems like you've got all these other things to do, but that comes down to effort management. If you're managing your effort well, that's your job as the leader, to listen and guide people, not to do all these little tasks. And so, creating that culture, I found just listening to people and then guiding them to where you want to go. Okay. And asking them, say, look, well, we're trying to, you've got this problem, you've raised this problem. We're trying to get here. How do we get there? And all that. So, and if you ask that in that way, you've listened, majority of people will start to go, okay, we can do this. And the complaints shifts to a productive conversation.
Yep. Tell our audience how you've handled balance.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm a bit of a workaholic because I enjoy what I do, but I'm also a balanced workaholic in the sense of I make time. Like I said, I know when I'm wearing out a little bit. I can feel it, so I'll go out and gump and push my lawnmower. Well, don't push it, walk behind it. I know, my partner, if I'm in relationship, I know that I need to spend time there. And again, listening, going, oh, okay, actually I need to spend this time. I need to make that time. And certainly if you like intimacy, making that time for your partner is a good thing. Yep. Otherwise you're not going to get it.
That's right.
But also too, from that perspective, having the ability to do one of the things I do, I have this little collection of snippets from movies that inspire me. And one of them, I'm a child of the 80s, and Patrick Swayze in Roadhouse was one of my favorite movies back then. But it was interesting from that perspective of approaching things of being nice, and I didn't always approach things in being nice, but now having that philosophy, it's made a massive difference to how get things done, because people feel that, they recognize. I learned too late in life that people don't hear, because I was very technical. I'd talk about, oh, this is the way to do it, and get very technical, explain the technical reasons. And then someone once said to me, I can't remember who it was, but they said, people remember not so much what you say, but how you make them feel. And from that, I shifted how I did things, and the focus became doing my best to make the person feel well. But same token too, got to balance that out. I was at a conversation where with a lady, and my son was there as well, and because I drag him along to stuff, and she started getting really angry. And I just politely said, yeah, Patrick Swayze thing when he was in Roadhouse, he said, be nice. He's a bouncer, but he's saying, be nice. I asked him to leave, be nice. And I just politely said to the lady, I said, look, I'm happy to have the conversation, but if you're going to start yelling, that's not appropriate. Let's tone it down a little bit. And she did. It was quite interesting how that responded, which again, when you're dealing with that male-female dynamic, you've got to be, today's world, you have to be a bit careful. But in a nice tone, I just said, that's not appropriate. We need to tone that down. And the response was there.
How much professional development have you invested in yourself?
It's constant. When I was in the army, going back in the day, in my leave time, one of my leaves, I spent enrolled in a NLP program. I spent 2 weeks, flew back to Melbourne, did a neurolinguistics programming course for 2 weeks on my leave. And I'm constantly looking, but same token too, I shifted as well back in, I used to read lots and lots of books, but then I thought about that. I'm going, I'm actually not implementing this. I'm still the same. Because how often have you had someone that says, oh, I just had a learning experience, and then you went and watched them do the same learning experience again.
Yep.
And so for me, I shifted and went, okay, I made a conscious focus of what I wanted to improve, and then sought out the information to improve that and made sure I implemented before I moved on to the next thing. And that had more profound effect than actually just reading lots of random stuff.
Have you had mentors or coaches along the way?
Yeah, I've had some really, really great coaches that back when I was in Perth, I went down to Albany. I met a great, which I think is a little hidden guru, this guy that had some great mind philosophy, and we spent a bit of time doing some hypnosis work and things like that. But then from a business perspective, I mentioned I worked with Frank Walker, and it was part of the board, and there was some really on the National Tiles Board, which were on the Family Peace Board, some really, really smart people that I got to work with, and they took the time to help out. Same token too, I was always not afraid to ask for help and ask people. I remember when I was in Perth, Ralph Sarich, lives in Perth. I wrote him a letter because I found out where he lived. As a young kid, I was 22, I think. I wrote him a letter and asked him some questions, and he took some time for me to give me some advice, which was really cool.
Maybe just give the audience Ralph Sarich some background.
Ralph Sarich, he created the orbital engine.
That's right.
Yeah, and then went on to be this big property magnate, with half $500 million or something like that. But he took time for, I think I was 22 at the time. He took time for a 22-year-old guy to answer a few questions, and it was because they asked. And I think that's the key thing with the mentors is find people that are well, but ask the question. Most will take time. There's a number of people here in Melbourne, that are in that category of extremely wealthy, very private people. They're not in public a lot, but I got to know. Fortunately, I with my stepdaughter's school, they're at a high-end school here in Melbourne, and a number of the people there, and I just asked them, I said, do you have time for coffee where we can have a chat? I've got a few things I'd like to pick your brain on. And they did, and they ended up paying for the coffee too, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think small business owners would be surprised if they just ask people for help. Mentors, they're very giving of their time.
Yeah, and it comes back to that whole philosophy of why we're doing it. It is to give back, is to make the world a better place, and people will help you if you are. Be respectful of the time, and I always was. But it's surprising how many people made that time.
Do you have a board of directors or advisors?
I don't have an official board of directors with where we're at the moment. I'm actually one of the hats I wear at the moment. I'm the CEO of a radio station as well, a terrestrial radio station. So I work with a board there. I took my son to that, and he was pretty bored. He got that experience of seeing that. But no, I have worked with boards. We don't currently have a board at the moment, but there is with some of the changes we have happening coming up there, we're looking at putting in place a board. Yeah.
All right, Damian, we're on to our final 5 questions. What do you think is the hardest thing in growing a small business?
Belief in yourself, and managing the workload, because there's a lot of things that I know if I look back at it, there's a lot of things that I did that I didn't need to do that I thought I needed to. I remember talking with an accountant, and he had has a podcast or a video, a YouTube channel. It wasn't a podcast, YouTube channel. And when you look at it, it's crap. If I'm going to be honest, it's really, really crap. In as far as when you look at the production quality, and part of my time I worked in film and television for a bit, so I know how to put something together that looks reasonably good. And but asked the question and said, "How much business do you get out of that?" He goes, "That's where all my business comes from." He gets so much out of it. And he said, it's because of the content that's in there. That's actually the content. The people listening are not interested in what it looks like, what it sounds like. They're interested in the knowledge that he's sharing. And a lot of times if I was starting again, I'd be going back to, I don't need to be spending all this time on these peripheral things. I need to focus on the couple of key things. A lot of time, again, we mentioned about the sales side thing. I spent more time on administration and operations than I did on sales.
Favorite business book which has helped you the most?
The E-Myth would be one that comes, that the E-Myth was by Michael Gerber. It was, that was probably at a time when I was ready to listen to that information. Beforehand, I probably wasn't. But as far as a business book, the E-Myth, but as far as an underlying foundational book that you will need as a person, because you might have a business skills, but if you are as a person are not whole enough, you will struggle. And that's Wayne Dyer's How to Be a No Limit Person.
How to be a what? No limit.
How to be a no limit person. It's actually not a book, it's an audio.
Okay.
Never actually released it as a book. So it's a combination between him he was on stage in Michigan, in Detroit, in front of 2,500 people or something like that. So the combination of that with him actually speaking, so it cuts in and out of him speaking on stage and then him speaking specifically. And that was for me, that was one that was a stage where I actually listened to that over and over again. So I implemented what was in there. And he sums up how to be happy in there. And even now, I was up in Port Douglas recently. While I was walking down the beach, I've got it on my phone. I listened to key points of that again, because that's one of those ones that just really, if you follow what's in there, certainly in the first half and the last part, it will be transformational to your life.
Any great podcasts or online learning tools you use for your own professional development?
This is going to sound hyperbole or that, but on the share.care podcast, we have a subset called Pondering Life, and there's a group of people around the world where we just actually get together one-on-one, not all together, but one-on-one. I get together and we pick a topic and we explore that. We do a Jordan Peterson, essentially have a 2-hour conversation. Last night I did one. It was 3 hours.
Wow.
We had a 3-hour conversation, but the things that came out of that, the things that we learned from that, and the people that come on it repeatedly come on it because we just develop so many new thinkings and learnings from that. So, and I think that's more where that learning process is, from having that discussion. Just listening to something's good, and I think we should do that, and certainly should read. But when you're actually having a discussion and you're exploring, going, what does that mean? How do we do that? And how does that relate to that? And you're getting that feedback. I find that really, really powerful. And I do that with on that Pondering Life part of the podcast, the share.care podcast, but also to I have that with a number of friends where we will have that discussion. We'll pick a time and we'll just talk through something, and those learnings are really powerful.
One tool you'd recommend to help grow a small business?
One tool, effective effort management. I call it ROE, return on effort. Being able to maximize how you do things, and a lot of times we don't realize it. And part of that technology, I mean, what we teach in the Max Time program that we have is that one of the first things is turn your alerts off on your computer, on your phone. Especially if you're a leader, you should not be, you don't call up, Murdoch or anyone like that, anyone at those levels, and they answer the phone. They don't do that. They have certain times in the day where they check their emails, they check their thing, and that's how you need to operate. You need to be in control of your day. And it's interesting when you do that, how much clarity it gives to your own thought process, because you're not on edge of when something beeps that you've got to answer it, and you can actually effectively manage your effort so that you get so much more done, so much more effective things done. And part of that is also prioritizing as well. A lot of people will start their day looking at their emails, checking their social media, which business should be there anyway, but checking their emails, going through this process. A lot of times I'll look at an email and then say I'll deal with that later. I think the research shows you waste about 15% of your time looking at email, not dealing with it straight away. Yep. Just that process of making that focus of being in control of your day, not your day controlling you.
Finally, my favorite question: what would you tell yourself on day one of starting out?
Good question. It can be a lot easier if you want it to be. If you focus in the right things. Life has a number of key principles, and if you follow those principles, it's pretty easy. But we overcomplicate it by doing a whole bunch of stuff that we don't need to do. An example, is principles and rules that exist in life. You went up to the 22nd story of a building, went out to the balcony and jumped off. Doesn't matter if you don't believe in gravity. Doesn't matter if you don't know gravity exists. You're going to go down. And from the perspective, we put that in, say, the context of money. If you want to generate money, as a small business, add value to the client. You're going to get, if you're adding value, you're going to be able to earn money. Same as an employee, you're adding value. And if you want to generate wealth, Richest Man in Babylon, it's nearly 100-year-old book.
Yep.
Save part of what you earn, invest part of that, and reinvest. That's not a difficult instruction. It's not complicated. And recognizing that these things are not, you want to have a good relationship with your customers. That simple call that I mentioned earlier, calling up the customer and saying, hey, how was your Christmas? How was your New Year? That's adding value. And those simple things like that, you don't need thousands and thousands of customers. One of my clients, they were a plumbing business, 3 directors, and they were flat out 7 days a week. I think they were turning over 15 million, if I remember correctly. And it was all too much. And I'd like to take credit for this, but they did it on their own. They decided, we're not going to do this anymore. We're going to get rid of all the crap clients. Well, their revenue went from 15 million to $10 million. Yes, they saved a lot more time. So they only worked 5 days a week, normal hours, which is great. So they had more time with their family. What they found was their profit went up. So even though their revenue dropped by 1/3, they actually took home more money. And that's because they got rid of a whole bunch of crappy customers that they didn't need. And that's where they again, this focus of starting and going, it's not that complicated. Focus, if the customer is being a pain in the butt, refer them to your competition.
Yeah, that's it.
Focus on the good ones, the ones that believe in you, and you have that relationship, because that's what it's about. People forget about the lifetime value of a customer. It's that component of investing and investing at the start and looking for that customer where you can have that relationship. It's a two-way thing. And if you're not getting the love back, let them go. Let them move on. Don't feel this need to do that. And that's where I come back to Greg Larson's comment to me about, back yourself. You're going to make the right decision. It's that. Just that would be my thing if it was to start again. It's just focus on those key things at work. Let the rest go.
Well, thanks very much for your time today, Damian. I really enjoyed our chat, and congratulations on the growth of the business over the last 12 years, starting out on your own and getting up to now 12 full-time equivalents, helping a lot of businesses with change and productivity and efficiency, and doing great things out there and enjoying life.
Yeah, thank you for having me on the show. It's been such a pleasure to share with your audience. Thank you.
We're getting some great iTunes reviews. For those listening, please pop over to your podcast app and leave us a review.